Imagine you're teaching someone sign language, and after a few months, that person starts teaching it to their child. Without your help, without your knowledge, just because they want their child to be able to communicate. Sounds normal, right? Now, imagine that person is a chimpanzee, and that their child actually learned. In 1966, scientists did something most people would have called impossible. They taught a female chimpanzee to communicate with humans in real sign language, and she passed that knowledge on by herself, the same way any parent would. This is not a story about animal tricks or circus performances. This is a story about the line between humans and the rest of the world, and about how much less clear that line is than you think. Sometimes the biggest difference between us and other species is not intelligence, not emotions, and not language. It's just the belief that we are the only ones. Alan and Beatrix Gardner, a husband and wife research team at the University of Nevada, had noticed something that everyone else had overlooked. Previous attempts to teach chimpanzees to speak had always failed for the same reason. Chimpanzees simply don't have the right vocal anatomy to produce human sounds. Their throats are built differently. They can't do it, and no amount of training will change that. But the Gardners asked a different question. What if the problem isn't the chimpanzee's intelligence? What if we've just been trying to teach them something their body was never built for? So they took a young female chimpanzee, named her Washoe, and instead of teaching her to speak, they started teaching her American Sign Language. They brought her into their home like a child. They talked to her in ASL all day. Every day. They showed her signs in context, in real situations the way you teach a toddler words, not by drilling them, but by using them naturally and letting the meaning sink in. And Washoe started signing back. Not all at once, not perfectly. But she started combining signs in ways nobody had taught her. When she saw a swan on a lake, she used two signs she already knew, water and bird, and created her own name for something she had no word for. Nobody showed her that. She figured it out herself. But the most incredible part of this story is not about Washoe and the scientists. It's about Washoe and her child. In 1979, Washoe lost her own infant shortly after birth and fell into a deep grief that everyone who worked with her described as impossible to mistake for anything else. Scientists adopted a 10-month-old chimpanzee named Louis and gave him to Washoe with one specific condition. No human would use ASL around Louis to see if Washoe would teach him herself. And she started teaching him. Observers watched Washoe take Louis's hand and shape his fingers into the correct sign. Patient, deliberate, exactly the way the Gardners had once done it with her. By the age of 5, Louis had learned 55 signs. Not one of them came from a human. His mother taught him all of them. And this is the moment where most people start to feel uncomfortable, because if Washoe taught Louis language, it means she passed on culture. Something we have always considered an exclusively human trait. When the Gardners' results reached the scientific world, they caused a storm that has never fully settled. One side said, "This is a revolution, proof that language is not exclusively human, that the line between us and other species is much thinner than we thought." The other side said, "This is not real language. Washoe is just copying gestures to get a reward. She doesn't understand what she's doing." And here is the thing that makes this debate so hard to resolve. How do you know that someone truly understands language and isn't just imitating it? How do you test that in a human? And why shouldn't the same criteria apply to a chimpanzee? Washoe died in 2007 at the age of 42. A very long life for a chimpanzee. Until the end, she used ASL, talked to her caretakers, expressed emotions and needs, and never stopped teaching others. Louis, her adopted son, is still alive today. But there is one thing from this story that almost nobody talks about. When one of Washoe's caretakers, Roger Fouts, came back to work after the death of his own child, Washoe stayed close to him for days. When he finally asked her in ASL if she knew what had happened, Washoe looked at him and used one sign. The sign for cry. Then she touched his face just below his eye. The place where tears fall. Fouts wrote later that in that moment he stopped thinking of Washoe as a research subject. He started thinking of her as someone who understood him. And here is the question I want to leave you with. If someone understands your pain, comforts you, and passes knowledge on to their children, Does it really matter that they are not human? Maybe the line between us and the rest of the world does not run where we thought it did. Maybe it runs exactly where we drew it ourselves. Sometimes the biggest difference between us and other species is not intelligence, not emotions, and not language. It's just the belief that we are the only ones. Washoe proved that at least on that one point, we might be wrong.